and it is top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and start the recording. Okay, we can go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have an amazing event on tap today. I am super excited about this conversation we're going to have. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you will have the opportunity to access it later on demand. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's discussion you have a question for any of our speakers or all of us, please go ahead and use your interface and submit your question in the question and answer tab. And we'll try to get to as many as we can during today's discussion. And also at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you will be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, let's go ahead and kick off today's panel discussion, which is issues and answers in cloud security. We have a star-studded lineup of speakers today taking part in today's panel discussion. First up, we have Teddy Pales, who is a senior sales engineer at Signal Sciences. Hi, Teddy. Thanks for joining me today. You're on mute, just letting you know. Renata Butko, who is head of product at Traceable. Thank you, Renata, for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Hello, all.
And we have Hims Power, who is the Principal Solutions Architect at Delphix. Hims, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with us. Really
everyone.
Appreciate
My
it.
pleasure. Thank you.
All right, great. I am just, like I said, I'm just so excited about this conversation we're going to have about cloud security. And, we've been talking a lot about security in general this year, especially in light of the pandemic and just the shift to employees working from home and companies having to pivot their entire basically strategies or business strategies and helping their employees and their customers not only survive but thrive and working productively and just kind of getting business done, as it were. So want to focus a lot on that today. Also some other things that are happening, especially in maybe related to DevSecOps and digital transformation, all those good topics. So I want to get started with the conversation. Real quick though, before we get started, this conversation is a part of or kind of loosely based on an ebook that we have just published on cloud security. So everybody who signed up for today's webinar is going to receive a link to download the ebook as well. So check your inboxes for that. But like I said, lots been happening this year in the security landscape in general, but specifically with cloud security. There's been a much larger focus on that as companies have had to shift a lot of their architectures and infrastructures to kind of cloud-based or at least hybrid environments. So I want to kind of start by level setting the conversation. Teddy, I want to kind of start off with you. What have you seen that has really impacted cloud security in 2020?
So, as we know, we were all affected by the COVID pandemic, and it's greatly changed the way that the entire world is doing business. And I think what's happened, which is really interesting, is that we have all kinds of companies that have all kinds of varied infrastructures, cloud, hybrid cloud, colo facility, on-prem data centers. But as the huge shift of work from home happened and the need to be able to access these application environments, these infrastructures from anywhere occurred, even legacy infrastructures that were on-prem have to now have some sort of typically cloud component in order for them to be accessed externally. There's been a rapid adoption of tools like Zscaler, zero trust tools in order to ensure that employees can still work and function and businesses can still happen, even though they weren't ever designed to be a remote workforce. So I think that's a huge shift that we've seen, and it's required a lot of security and technology teams to pivot and try to figure out how they can expose these environments safely. And unfortunately, what often happens is it has to happen so rapidly, it's very difficult to do it in the safe manner. But it also means that teams that were very slow to adopt cloud technologies are now having to quickly adopt those cloud security vendors and those cloud security tools. And there's a lot of probably just a lack of education. And it's not because people couldn't learn, but it's because they haven't had the time or the chance to learn because we've had to shift so quickly. And I think we're seeing that in more and more high-level attacks as well. But I'll kind of open it up from there. I'm just seeing so many people who don't know how to deal with the cloud, trying to deal with the cloud, and it's really, really interesting. So.
Yeah. So Renata or Hims, do you what do you guys see as kind of a lot of the big catalysts this year? I mean, obviously, either in addition to or as part of the pandemic, what are some of the things that have really impacted cloud security?
Yes, I'll add to Terry's point that absolutely COVID has been really transformational. The work from home projects which we were trying to execute for many years and they were having roadblocks are now immediately rolled out, and all of a sudden all the 50,000 workforce has the capability to work from home because it has been a business imperative event, and people cannot go on and do their work unless they work from home. So definitely a transformative for that. At the same time, the security policies are also evolving around the cloud, where people were very restrictive about their usage and data, and they have opened up because there is no other way.
The other part that I've seen this year and perhaps towards the end of 2019 is more emphasis on cyber warfare. We see quite a few state-sponsored malicious activities from across the world, and they are quite a bit more sophisticated than script kiddies. This is an orthogonal trend, but something that we also have to pay attention to.
So, Renata, to that point, have you seen an increase in cybersecurity threats because of the pandemic? Is that something that organizations are maybe just now kind of grappling with? Maybe the after effects, or even just the rate and pace of cyber threats that are happening now?
In terms of cyber threat detection and breach detection, we all know that this is one of the biggest challenges in the industry, especially as Teddy's mentioned, zero trust. When it comes to APIs that have not been previously exposed or new models of business, it takes quite some time for people to start understanding that's even been a problem. Personally, I have not seen any work from home or pandemic specific issues on the rise yet, but I have a suspicion that many of those are yet to come to the surface in early 2021.
Okay. Teddy, you deal a lot with layer 7. So, are you having, have you seen anything, related to cybersecurity threats as we've kind of, moved forward with the pandemic?
Yeah, so kind of what I was saying earlier, and Hims kind of reaffirmed too, is that this is rapidly shifted the move for digital transformation for many, many organizations. We're seeing so many companies increase their online footprint because they can't get people in retail stores and retail locations anymore. I personally have seen this shift with a lot of my customers. For example, dealt with, if you think about companies like Chick-fil-A, who is a chicken sandwich company is what you would assume, but they consider themselves a software company now because a huge percentage of their business goes through their mobile app and through their APIs. So these companies that provide specific services that are physical are now having to move a huge portion of their business to online. So as more and more of our resources are available online and exposed online, then the threats are just going to in tandem increase. And in the last year, we've seen some pretty high-profile breaches. I mean, just this morning, FireEye, in tandem with SolarWinds, released the huge breach that has affected government and U.S. That's also what Renata, what you said is what they're saying, is that it's coming from foreign governments. So that's huge. You know, we saw the Zoom data breach in April, right? Zoom always had vulnerabilities, but wasn't as big of a target. Now everyone's doing business on Zoom, and I know I got kicked out of a couple of Zooms because for some reason my name was like rendering strange. And so there's a lot of security on that. So you get kicked out of a Zoom if your name's not right. You know, we saw the Twitter attack this summer, which was not necessarily a traditional attack that you're seeing, but this was targeting high profile users because the whole world is online.
Right.
This is different than a friend who's traveling overseas calling me and saying, I need you to wire me money, right? That's not what's happening anymore. This is all happening online. So the more and more businesses that move business and critical functions to online, the more companies that, whether they're brick and mortar or they have a back end warehouse, are running their business and their revenue through online resources, the more we're going to see those attacks increase. And you know, from the same token, as we move to the cloud, then layers 3 through 6 are not as important to customers because they're outsourcing that. Now they're super important. You know, we saw a really big AWS SSRF vulnerability. It got released at the end of 2019. That was huge. We're going to start to see vulnerabilities both in customer software, but then also in the vendor software because the vendors are being relied upon for more layers of security. So
Interesting. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the need for digital transformation then, because of the pandemic. You know, we all saw companies pivot almost overnight in not only transforming their networks, but you know, just adopting new technologies to enable their employees to work from home. And along with that, we're seeing organizations swiftly adopting DevOps and DevSecOps technologies and processes to kind of help them move even faster. Hims, I want to start with you on this one. Have you seen organizations successfully adopt DevSecOps as they, you know, and are they kind of maybe leapfrogging traditional DevOps in favor of just going straight up DevSecOps? And how are you seeing that kind of fall into place?
Yes, it's a mixed bag. Most companies, everybody wants to, you know, have the best performance, and in order to have the best business performance, you need solid technology behind you.
Right.
Everybody wants to have most scalable, burstable systems where you can support, you know, the whole planet on a single website. In reality, it gets a little bit different because there are a lot of, I would say, people process management kind of a thing where you want to deliver as fast as possible. From a technologist perspective, business comes before technology always. And we want to give best performance to business, be it a trade execution or a healthcare prediction for a care we want to provide. But everybody's understanding that you need to transform. Those old days are gone. You need to, that, you know, in my days when we used to have waterfall model, you used to do 4 releases a year, you know, that time is gone. Now you need to have 15, 20 sprints running parallelly every day, and you need to release multiple bug fixes every time, every day. The time of, okay, something went wrong, roll it back, that is gone. Just keep rolling forward, test on as much data as possible, utilize the data which you collect from the customers, do whatever modeling analytics you can do, understand customer sentiment, and that's how the bottom line of business gets impacted. And every CIO, every CTO understands that today, I believe, whether they have the capability, the intention to actually execute on that, that's a different talk.
Okay. So where do you see kind of cloud security and compliance playing a role in that? especially compliance.
So technology follows business, business follows laws. That's how it usually flows. And when the business decides that they need to be, let's say, GDPR compliant, and there's a lot of data which needs to be handled, it comes on a CISO's desk. There's formed policies, and then there are security controls which are decided based on a firm's policies. JP Morgan Chase spends $500 million on security products. You can get every security product out there in the world available for purchase for that much money. Still, they feel insecure. So, and they have every cloud out there available to them, and that's the gravity of the situation, that you have digital transformation, innovation going through multiple data analytics, ML projects running. You're trying to extract data, but the security is changing. The liabilities are also changing as you're moving to the cloud.
Yeah, I think the days of, a hammer approach, security was always the office of no. They were always telling the business no for whatever they wanted to do. That's not acceptable anymore. And I think for security, pure security professionals, that's what the DevOps movement is about not saying no. It's about balancing risk with practical protection strategies and mechanisms. In my world, from a layer 7 approach, we don't take like a firm blocking process. We take a more intelligent way of blocking that allows us to be really comfortable with blocking production users, or blocking attackers, but not breaking production users. And everyone has a different barometer for that. But I think, to him's point, you can have every security tool implemented, but if you're not thinking about it practically and saying, how can security protect us, but also enable the business, then you're slowing down the process. And every security professional out there needs to be thinking, how can I enable the business, but still minimize risk?
I want to add to what Hims and Teddy have said. Minimizing risk is what we want to do. In the security pros, it's not up to us to say, no, you can't. It's up to us to say, this is how you can. And the way you do that is precisely as Him says, with policies. Are policies that permeate the entire software development life cycles. This is how you can develop, this is how you can deploy, and this is how you can operate, including the safe development practices, security testing along the way, and blocking in a safe manner, and only once you're confident. And this is how you manage the risk of the application. And the policies, of course, change with digital transformation and with the general shift in business priorities and business realities. Your workforce now all work remotely. You need a different policy for how you deploy.
What about the user experience? We've been hearing a lot about the fact that organizations are making so many accommodations to their workforce these days, and sometimes to the detriment of security. So when we're talking about user accessibility, whether it be employees or customers, where's that line basically between making sure that the application is secure and having the best possible user experience available?
I think it's going to depend on the business, for sure. There's not an easy answer for that. I know when I started working in IT security at a Fortune 500 company years ago, shadow IT was what we always talked about. People would get email access. I mean, this is back in the day when BlackBerry was prolific, and people would get email on their personal phone because no one shut down ActiveSync because they didn't really know what ActiveSync was. And we had email boxes on hundreds of thousands of people's personal phones, right? I think that it's about not ignoring the elephant in the room, and security, having an open line of communication with end users to understand when and where shadow IT can happen and why it's happening. And then it's about education to those end users, about telling them why what they are possibly doing from a shadow IT perspective are not okay. I think sometimes it's just like a slow process when you're merging two companies together, getting access to all of your content across those. I may have experienced this recently. It can be very difficult.
Sure, you know nothing about that, Betty.
And so you have to be careful. But again, it's about having those open lines of communication and having IT not shut people down, but figure out the why behind maybe requests that are coming in that fall outside of policy, and then making sure that you have really good education. I think it's less about the tools that you're giving them and more about constantly communicating with your end users and understanding what their needs are.
I think the tools do play an important role as well. Lines of communications are absolutely important. But the old school tools, a lot of them have relied on manual configuration, regular expressions, manual implementation of the policies. And that is one of the reasons why it took the security product quite some time to react to the change. When you have modern technologies, machine learning that is adaptive and context aware, when you have technologies that follow the user workflows with more of the customized dashboards, an easier way to visualize what is going on in the environment, that it's technology that enables the communication that Ted is talking about and automates, of course.
We actually just got a chat comment from Danielle, who said part of the challenge for business cybersecurity is maintaining and using the full set of tools necessary for keeping up with the changing threat landscape. Renata, that's exactly what you were just talking about. But what do you guys see kind of in general when we're talking about the tools and just being able to keep up with the threats, especially this year, because just, the world is on fire basically, and we just don't know what to do with ourselves half the time. So, how can organizations keep up if the tooling can't keep up in a lot of situations?
In a way, this is a vicious cycle. Keeping up with the tools is by and large people's problem, not the tools problem. In the large organization, Hims was referencing Chase. I think they have hundreds of security professionals on staff, and they probably have hundreds of tools already in their portfolio as well. So to get all these security analysts educated on the new tool, understand what the tool can do, integrating the tool into existing processes, that's probably more of a challenge in asking your existing tool vendors to extend what they already have with the new functionality. I don't know if you guys agree.
I'll agree partially to that. A wave of attacks which we have seen this year, mostly ransomware. We'll take 1 minute to go into that. With the emergence of bitcoins and anonymous transactions, my company, our clients have seen a wave of attack where there is no extraction of data. Nobody takes out anything sensitive. They just disable access to it and then ask for money. And how do we protect that kind of new attack? And it's not one hacker doing it from Florida. It's as it was said, it's an advanced persistent threat, which is originating from state actors who have, probably as good tools, maybe better tools than you have. And they're doing constant surveillance over months, and then one day they simply attack. As Rana said, you need awareness, very, very important in your whole organization. One click on an email and attacker can, or adversary, I would say, can destroy your whole system. So keeping the right policies, procedures, as well as a protection against traditional methods, that is becoming very, very important.
When does it become, I'm sorry, Teddy, you had something you wanted to say?
This is like everyone has said, I will mirror or reinforce this is not an easy problem to solve. I think something that you can do to help with it is look for tools that embrace the culture that you are in or want to be in. There are a lot of security tools out there, and there are a lot of legacy security tools, and you can't expect to keep up with a modern attacker if you're deploying a technology that updates in a waterfall fashion. Right? So looking and evaluating your tools to see if they are embracing a DevOps culture, if they're embracing a DevSecOps culture. Now, what I'll tell you is if you send them an RFP, they cannot give you a 3-year roadmap. That is not something that happens anymore. But I can tell you that if you need something from a company that's DevOps, typically it can happen much more quickly than those companies that, you know, are doing a traditional waterfall cycle. So it's finding those tools that can fail fast quickly, fix fast quickly, patch quickly, that can take care of the low-hanging fruit, and hopefully then your teams can focus on those more intense attacks like Hims is talking about, those ransomware attacks. But you don't want to be spending your time chasing down, you know, false positives, or like Renata was saying, tuning a policy via regex. That's taking up time and resources that you could spend focused on those more advanced attacks. If you can automate the protection that's happening for generic attacks and the noise in the system, then you can really spend your resources on those more higher level attacks, or attacks that are specific to your business, right? If you have Apache, you should be able to either patch Apache or put in a security tool that's going to patch the Apache struts vulnerability. That shouldn't be something you're spending your time on. That should be automatic. You should be spending your time on patching your own code issues, which are, you know, a reality of every sort of application environment. So.
But what about the cloud service provider? You know, a lot of times companies get in trouble because they think that the cloud services provider is going to take care of the security for them. And we've been talking a lot about the shared responsibility model lately. But, you know, does that change from you know, employer or business to cloud security provider? And it seems like, you know, it's kind of a shifting line, if you will, of who's responsible for what and at what point in the, you know, whether it's the software development lifecycle, or whether it's just a service that's being you know, managed in the cloud, or however, you know, and how do companies understand exactly what it is that the cloud services provider is not only willing, but is able to provide for them as far as the security offering or security service is concerned? And how can organizations just kind of manage that entire process?
Right. That's a loaded question. You know,
of course, I'm all about the loaded question.
I'll try to, Barb. So, at my role as a data privacy advisor, privacy and security, two aspects of the whole data governance model. Privacy is about learning. Okay, how do you queue data, retain that data, purge that data, share that data, sell that data, having a policy, converting those policies into some controls. On the security side is you implement those controls. You can have a very foolproof security architecture ecosystem, still you could be leaking out data. So there is a shared security model most cloud vendors have. If you go to AWS, you will find out that, okay, data center security, hardware, encryption, HSM, those are the cloud provider's responsibility. Then they will provide you tools like IAM, identity and access management, or client level encryption, or AD, or a DNS service. But you have to use those tools, and you need to have a policy or process in place that you know your liabilities, and you're using those tools to fulfill those liabilities. So the security part, privacy part, you need to know, okay, is your sysadmin going rogue, as Teddy said, and he's posting your data everywhere on GitHub, as happened in Capital One, or otherwise, you know, keep a mindset of security. The data in your data centers, it is not your data. It belongs to the customers. You're just a custodian for them. Patch your systems, patch your databases, use the tools provided. I hope that covers it.
I'd also say evaluate when those cloud native security tools aren't the right option, right? Every single cloud vendor has their own DDoS protection, has their own WAF, has their own usually identity management, has their own key vault storage, the list goes on and on and on. But I would never say Microsoft is a security company. So do we want to choose Microsoft for certain security tools or not? That is something that you have to evaluate. And also, if say today we're all in AWS, great, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow you'll be all in AWS. And if you have to manage certain security policies, this happens with applications a lot because applications will be distributed. Oftentimes, the backend system will be hosted in GCP and the front end will be in AWS. But if it's all, your layer 7 landscape, well, how can you protect that, and how can you have consistency across 2 different cloud native layer 7 security tools? So there's certain tools that I think need to be chosen that can install in the cloud, that are frictionless when it comes to the CI/CD pipeline, but that also enable you to have one pane of glass and one security profile across those different payloads, because attackers don't care physically where something is located. And if you have inconsistency in your security policies across AWS versus GCP versus Azure, that is another risk in another area for compliance issues, as well as just attack issues. So.
I want to add just a little bit, because Charlene said shared responsibility model. And I think it's probably important to reiterate to the listeners and to the industry in general. It is fairly simple at a high level. The data, the application logic, and the users are your responsibility no matter what. Layers 1 through 4, maybe 5, can be the responsibility of the cloud provider. Securing the platform is more or less a commodity, but the application logic, especially for API-driven distributed applications, the data, especially in the situations where you are handling sensitive or private data, and your own users, you can't get away from deciding what is permissible, what is the framework, what are the controls, and what are the tools to take care of that.
All right. Yeah. Well, what about multi-cloud environments, though? Teddy, you mentioned that applications can actually, be distributed across different clouds. Do you think that actually makes applications or maybe increases the threat vector, if you will, or the attack vector, or do you think it actually kind of increases the level of security that an application has, because it's not all in one place, so it's kind of easier or less, I guess it's more difficult to attack?
I don't think it's about more or less difficult to attack, because again, attackers don't necessarily know. Sometimes they can find out through reconnaissance where things are at times. I think it's about the risk from the company perspective, because of those inconsistencies. Sorry, the word left me for a moment. The inconsistencies that can happen across those security policies, because you're not getting the same products. An ALB is not the same as a Google load balancer. You can't copy and paste. Now you can, if you want to control that. If you want to say, I'm going to use Nginx or HA proxy for my load balancer. That is a way to remove the risk of being in multi-cloud, but then also remove the risk of the single point of failure per se of being in one cloud provider. But then you have to make those choices and you have to take on more responsibility. So that shared responsibility model, as opposed to saying, hey, AWS and Google, I'm going to let you be responsible for load balancing. I'm just going to put some policies in place. In this case, if you want consistency 100%, then you have to then take responsibility and say, I'm going to control the code. I'm going to control not the physical infrastructure, but infrastructure as code to be deployed into these environments so that I can have consistency. But customers have to make that choice. And I would say I see more often that they're going to rely on the cloud vendor because it is cheaper in most cases, and it's more frictionless from a deployment perspective. Now, Nginx is a great product. I think Nginx is fantastic, but it's going to require expertise in Nginx. It's going to require more code level changes versus doing changes through the UI. So it's going to depend on the team's expertise and their comfort level with doing that. So you can remove the risk of having inconsistencies, but you have to be proactive about doing that.
Okay.
To add to that, I've seen a lot among our own customers, especially mid to large size financials, that in the desire to get themselves secured from the different processes in different clouds, they go as far as deploying their own Kubernetes on top of the IaaS infrastructure, not using the EKS or GKS or other hosted Kubernetes environments, precisely for the same reason Teddy is mentioning, the load balancing, taking it a step further, to make sure that the environment can be cloud independent and it can run on the private cloud or in a public cloud.
That's right. I'll hit it from one point. Whosoever goes on AWS knows once you start getting an AWS bill, it never goes down. It always goes up. So
it's like a tax bill, right?
Yes, yes. And the modern world is all about commoditization. To put in, there's a cost for compute, there's a cost for storage, there's a cost for maybe AI ML prediction. I will, as a customer of cloud, I'll go for whatever cloud is giving me that particular service for free. And I need to have my data and my compute, everything as modular. I want to run a EKS or I want to run my own Nginx. Wherever the compute is cheaper, I should be able to use that particular cloud, or wherever their service is superior. So Google AI Hub is superior to, let's say, a SageMaker or a DeepRacer. I'll want to use that, but not necessarily the S3 buckets. So wherever I should be in a pluggable module, whatever comes best to me, in the interest of my technology, my business, I should be able to plug into it rather than just building on technical debt, sticking with one provider.
What about the concept or the idea of governance regarding cloud services providers and the offerings that they have? To your point, each cloud services provider has a different. They may have the same, load balancing or identity and access management or whatever, but they're all calling it something different, and they're all maybe slightly different. There's no kind of cookie cutter. So you can't really go from one cloud provider to the next and understand exactly what their level of capability is and every single one of the tools and services that they have available. So do you guys see that maybe that's kind of tripping up some companies sometimes when it comes to whether, they understand exactly what they are getting from their cloud services provider from, in terms of security? Or do you think that maybe there's some sort of governance that's kind of needed, or maybe kind of an overlay of, I don't know, like a simple set of terminology or something like that that goes across all of the cloud services providers just to kind of level the playing field?
Are you asking that there is no standardization between what is being offered and what I need?
Yeah, basically, kind of genericizing.
Well, we do have a Cloud Security Alliance, and we do have the governance framework that is offered there. And I know that at least from what I've seen, AWS and Microsoft have a documentation for mapping the security policies to the controls that CSA is listing. So that's one way to go from the community side and normalize that way. It is still sometimes difficult to map it to the specific tools, and not all the tools are compatible with all the underlying compute and network infrastructures either. In each of the cloud providers as plenty of different things. Like, I still don't know how security works in serverless. But at least
I don't either. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an age-old question of how do we convert old technology to new technology. I mean, nowadays I get my new iPhone and I can just transfer my data over, either restore from backup or not. But back in the day, you got a new cell phone and you couldn't even keep your same phone number, right? So we're seeing. I think that what the shift that's happening here is that more things are done as software because software is more transferable. I mean, we've seen some legacy players like F5 try to virtualize their load balancer. I have never talked to a customer who successfully deployed it in AWS. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's not, it doesn't fit the model. I have customers who are full Windows shops moving to Azure. And it's not that easy. It's not easy, even though it's all Windows-based systems. They can't just copy paste and deploy into Azure. So this is the uncomfortable process that happens with technology shifts. And I think this is what is pushing more and more software as a service products, because you can deploy software as a service into any cloud. So that is easier. But when it comes to the native solutions that those cloud providers are offering, they don't want you to be able to transfer it because that makes them sticky. As Tim said, that makes their bill go up. They don't want ALBs or ALBs config to be transferable to a load balancer in GCP or in Azure. They don't want that. And I get that because they're a business, and that's what businesses do. So that's where that, like we're talking about, that balance comes in. You have to choose what you're going to go native with your cloud provider and what you're going to go third party in order to provide that consistency.
All right, great. So just a quick time check, guys. We are already 40 minutes past the hour. Time is flying here. So I just want to remind the audience, if you have a question for any of us, please go ahead and use the question and answer tab and submit it. We just got another chat in comment from Danielle, who said, does it mean organizational preparation is another important part of a complete proactive cybersecurity posture? That means having the right tools, but also maintaining a minimum threshold of threat awareness. Obviously, yeah, I mean, the more you plan, the better the outcome, hopefully. that's kind of the idea there. But what do you guys think about the whole concept of the organizational preparation? How much do you think that's happening now, and how much are we doing enough, basically?
Never enough.
I still know people who are thinking of going to cloud. So.
Yeah.
And cloud is like, damn, 16 years old.
Welcome to 2000.
I think it's important that it's so different. But I've sold all across the globe, and when it comes to new technology, West Coast always adopts things first. It's this weird phenomena that I've seen. Things kind of start to move towards the East Coast, then they jump over in the middle and go to the East Coast. The East Coast adopts it, then it kind of works its way in the Midwest, and then Texas, which is where I live, is the last to ever adopt new technology.
I fully agree, but that's a very interesting observation.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to California-based companies that have built everything cloud first, then yeah, they have great, robust programs with this. If you're talking to Texas-based oil and gas companies, they have hundreds of people and very rarely get things accomplished in an amount of time that would make sense to us in a modern application or a modern web environment in the cloud. But yeah, I think being aware of, threat awareness, and I think the communication of the fact that you're not going to remove all threats, and you can never put risk at zero. Risk can never be mitigated to zero, but awareness and communication. I have a customer here in Texas who I won't name, but has a really robust red team and purple team program. And they weekly release reports about where they feel their biggest threat landscape is. But that goes all the way up to the highest levels. That goes to the CIO. They all know exactly where they feel their risk is most focused, and that may change based on business issues, right? So with COVID, obviously risk changed because the way that they were working changed. So yes, it's about having a robust program as much as you can, and it's about awareness from bottom to the top levels in an organization to accept that risk is never going to be completely minimized.
This is also part of the DevSecOps initiative and a trend, as we talked about. Part of the DevSecOps is actually making sure that the threat awareness exists at the development time and at the deployment time. This is how the organizationally security changes. It's not just the tools. We may understand the risk, but we also need to educate the developers with what, and developers also need to reciprocate by making it explicit. These are the design assumptions that we are making in between them and the security professionals at the design time. There needs to be awareness of what risk we are accepting by making these design assumptions.
Right. I'll add from Teddy's talk of how West Coast and the innovation usually is thought that it drives, but and Renata's point that how do we minimize risk? So it's all about how you design and architect the whole system. So example I would give is Stripe. Their solution is 7 lines of code, which totally takes out any PCI compliance and risk out of your system. And it's so easy to implement $1 billion valuation just based on 7 lines of code. And you can just integrate those XML blob into your page and your payment system is done. So that's how you would probably, I would say, an ideal practice of reducing risk going forward modern. I don't need to do anything with the payment exchange or no need to patch or anything. Just use the right product out there and get over with it so that I don't have to go to loops like that.
Interesting. All right. We actually, we've gotten a couple questions and I thought maybe we could answer some of them so we don't get a backup here. Patrick just asked an interesting question. Do you feel having a cloud-based VPN is important and ensuring all connections to corporate resources originate from the VPN? Or is it just so easy to spoof that network degradation is not worth the benefits? Definitely relevant in the pandemic and everybody's trying to work remotely, log in.
I'll try to answer it from my perspective. Most of the people who are using either are operators or developers or some side of business. If you have a VPN, it's probably in the modern system, you would have a centralized IT somewhere, and then everybody is using some sort of devices. I'm assuming along with VPN, you assume there is some sort of MDM running on those systems, which ensure that there is some connectivity. So you're not actually, the question about network degradation usually does not apply today because you're not moving heavy kind of data between your data center and your local device. Everything is happening on your internal IT. You're just accessing it from outside with a firewall or Fortinet or Sophos, whatever kind of network you're using. So VPN, absolutely yes. If you're not using VPN, you are bound for failure at some point of time. But it's kind of the deal. You can use your own VPN. You can use a cloud-based VPN or a third-party VPN. I would probably go for something like which is known in the system, like a Fortinet or somebody who works on your on-prem system also as well as cloud.
Okay. I mean, I would argue that zero trust is being pushed forward more often, which is, doesn't require a VPN. This is the different way of authentication. It still requires you to do 2-factor or more than that, depending on what your organizational policies are. But, I would say a traditional VPN and tunneling all your traffic or trying to lock it down that way is less and less common. It's there for sure, and it's an option. Mm-hmm. But zero trust allows us to control what devices are hitting services and also control the back end. So that's what I'm seeing more and especially because when we move to the cloud, now we can lock down services in the cloud, but by default, they are available externally. So I have seen many customers who believed that they locked down access to an AWS service, and we install in them and find traffic coming from China, which they were not expecting or anticipating, and I thought they had locked that down. So when you go to a zero trust model, then your mechanisms are different than your traditional, IP ACLs that you're putting in place. So I think that that's becoming more and more common, especially in cloud services, because they are natively available to the entire internet.
I'm with Teddy on this one. The perimeter security that is what VPN helps with is not a panacea anymore. The state of user-side encryption is also improved quite a bit once we moved to the higher versions of TLS. So monitoring the data flows, monitoring the internal APIs traffic, multi-factor auth, and the use of good encryption along the way, in-flight and local, mitigates a lot of factors and gives you a lot more than just perimeter security.
All right. Well, actually, Patrick just chatted us up again and said, is VPN not part of zero trust? we use MDM, so registered devices, SSO with multi-factor authentication. So is VPN not needed?
Again, the answer is depending on what kind of service you're using. If you're using Gmail or OneDrive, then MDM is enough. If you're accessing an internal shell-based terminal of your server, then you would need a VPN, of course.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, great. So a quick time check. We're about a little more than 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So we're going to have to start wrapping up our conversation. Unfortunately, because I kind of get the feeling we could go at least for another half an hour, but we don't have that time. So let's go ahead and start kind of wrapping things up. I'm interested in hearing from each of you kind of what your thoughts on kind of cloud security moving forward in this kind of new way of working and just the world that we live in now, understanding and recognizing that remote work is it's here to stay. I mean, organizations are it's like a culture shift, like overnight, which is awesome. I think that, so many companies now are not only saying, yeah, you can go work from home, but they're saying, yeah, just don't come back to the office. So with that in mind, what do we see down the road, maybe in the next 6 to 9 months or even a year? When it comes to just locking down and securing these applications that are so necessary for employees to be able to do their jobs and for developers to create awesome applications and just for businesses to get their work done. So Teddy, I'll start with you. What do you see kind of down the road?
I mean, this isn't probably going to be groundbreaking, but just more code, more infrastructure as code, more things that are handled through software. A huge need for developers in the world because so much more of infrastructure is going to be handled remotely, and it's the way to control it. And then when it comes from an attack perspective, like I said at the beginning, the more services that are exposed externally, the more businesses that do more of their revenue online, it's just going to be more and more attacks. So I think it's going to be really important to shore up, a base level of security and ensure that you can focus on things that are specific to your business. I think it's going to be really important too for some of these businesses and industries that are going online that are not used to being an online business to share what's happening, something that our platform specifically provides some level of like threat intelligence based on what we're seeing, but it's not industry specific. And I think it's going to be really important for industries like healthcare, like financial services, like just brick and mortar stores that are going online. I'm working with a customer right now who's about to expose their online portal externally for the first time, where it's not locked down in a B2B network. And they don't even know what it's going to look like when they do that. So I think peer sharing and that kind of approach is going to be really important. When it comes to attackers, we need to make sure that we realize that we're all at risk. And so the more we share with each other, the more of a community-based approach that we can take, we will all benefit from that.
That's interesting. I like that whole community approach idea of security. Hims, what about you? What are you thinking is going to be happening in the next 6 months to a year from now?
Yeah, so I live in New York City. Because of pandemic, you cannot write off the city. The city will come back at some point of time. What I can make out is going forward, there will be more money spent on technology. That's for sure. Okay. And the data is going to increase as more services, more technology adoption. The data is simply going to explode. My customers have like 80, 90 petabyte of data. Never foreseen, never envisaged that kind of data. If we can protect them, have the right awareness, the right mindset about the security of data, we will be succeeding. The attacks, they will keep on evolving. Our responses will also keep on evolving. And there will always be some zero-day attack or threat, which we'll always have. We need to be ready for it. And we just need to keep elevating our security posture as the threat or risk appetite increases.
Okay. As they say in New York, if you see something, say something, right?
Or run away.
Right, or run away. Yeah, I don't think that's the idea here. not a good idea. No. Renata, what do you think is going to be happening in the next 6 months to a year or so?
We don't just work online now. We live online. We buy food online. We get entertainment online. We talk to our family online. And because of that, a lot of the companies who did not have a digital presence before are accelerating the digital transformation. So two things come from that. They don't really specialize or understand the new world of delivering business in the cloud. So they will definitely need help. And that help can come in the form of hosted security services, or him, I think, was referencing Stripe, and in the form of SaaS providers who automate a lot of the functionality and wraps governance and compliance into their part. So I think understanding where you don't know, when you know what you don't know, you can deal with it, and you can get help from the community.
All right, great. So more money, more information, more cooperation, hopefully. Awesome, great. Well, we're 5 minutes to the top of the hour. I think we have time for one question, and then we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. We got a question a little earlier that I wanted to come back to. Is there a best practice for cloud security industry-wide? Nobody wants to take that one. Jay, I don't.
Of course,
best practice.
Do something. That's the best practice. Don't do nothing. It's so industry wide is not. I couldn't say that. It would depend on who the client is and what their business is. But I mean, there's definitely best practices to be followed. Of course. I think that it's going to be industry specific, and you need to hire consultants or smart people that are leading experts to help you with it based on where you're at. And you need to talk to your peers about what's best for you. Different companies have different levels and priorities of thresholds. When you're talking about e-commerce based companies, they usually take a less intense approach than a financial services company does, right? So that the answer is going to be based on your business, your application environment, what's exposed, what your threat landscape is. There's not just an easy button, unfortunately. I'm sure we all wish that there was. So. Right.
Yeah, I mean, so Him's earlier mentioned compliance. That's a huge thing, especially when you're talking about certain verticals such as financial services, healthcare, things like that. So definitely consider what the compliance requirements are.
You need to have a framework. Usually it's called EGRC. Enterprise governance, risk and compliance, depending, as he said, your size of your IT, your business, your vertical, things will vary, but you need to have a program in place, and then you can plug in your IT. And IT can be local, it could be cloud. You need to understand your liabilities regarding that and take action accordingly. And the tools are there, a plethora of them. You can use any of them.
Okay, all right. Renata, any thoughts there, or? Just don't want to touch that one.
I did mention Cloud Security Alliance, which would help. And most of the larger cloud vendors have a pretty good set of recommendations for an explanation for what they do for their own part, for the compute and network and storage security, and what they recommend the minimal is that the clients should do for their own workloads. But as far as industry specific, I totally agree with Hinz. You need to look at what your industry recommends, what are the compliance requirements, and build your own GRC framework of that.
All right. Great. Well, we are 2 minutes to the top of the hour. So unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for the question and answer period and today's discussion. I do want to thank folks who did submit questions. If we did not get to your question, please know that every single one of these smart people here on this webinar will be getting a copy of the questions that came in, or their organizations will be getting. And I'm sure somebody from the organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. Also want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the presentation, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, before we close things out, we did mention at the top of the hour that we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let me tell you the list of winners. Our first winner today is James V. Congratulations, James. Second winner is Brian O. Congratulations, Brian. Third winner today is Anna Marie B. Congratulations, Anna Marie. And final winner today is Robert S. Congratulations to all 4 of you. We will be following up with you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Teddy, Hims, Renata, thank you so much for a great conversation. I had such fun, and such great information was imparted. So I know a lot of good stuff for the audience. So thank you again for your time, for your expertise. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you.
Great. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Bye.